Hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet another episode of Rabbit Hole Stories. We've got two very special guests. Our first dual guests here today from the Bitcoin racing team. We've got Charlie and Jason. How are you doing, gents?
Absolute pleasure to be here. It really is. So thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you
it's
so
our
much.
absolute pleasure, Jason, and you also, Charlie. And I'm trying to think how we can go with this, but I think we just go with the flow because we're all about Bitcoin rabbit hole stories here. But we've got the two of you here today, so if I just kick off by saying what we usually ask guests is to sort of give us their Bitcoin origin story. What is it that they discovered when how did they discover Bitcoin? Why they stayed in the ecosystem, and what is it they're doing now in the Bitcoin ecosystem? So if I just kick that out there and then let it land to either you or you, Jason, or Charlie, and you just kick off with wherever you want to go.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll take this one, Charlie, because obviously your story ties in very nicely with the Bitcoin racing story. So I'll sort of tell my personal story first of all. So I discovered Bitcoin fairly early on, about 2013, in a newspaper article in the days when you used to still read newspapers. And I misread it, and I do talk about this quite often. I misread it as Britcoin, which of course is something which is creeping back into the vocab these days for all the wrong reasons. And I thought it was a British invention of some sort. But then I started to look into it a little bit more, and I researched online. And of course, I think you guys have been around for a while as well. So anything that you Googled at that time was very technical, very badly written, very badly informed, and usually very negative. So what really sort of finished me off was I Googled what do economists think of Bitcoin. And of course, I had this slew of really negative answers. So I decided they obviously knew what they were talking about, and I didn't. So I bowed out of my Bitcoin journey at that point. Roll then forward to the end of 2016, 2017. I had been keeping an eye on it. And I noticed it had been moving and there was still some stuff going on about it. So I thought, right, this time I'm going to research it properly. And so I did. And then realized that this thing is massive. It's going to change everything. I need to be involved. So I bought my first Bitcoin. And I can't remember how much it was now. It was only a few $100, I think, and just started to do the research. Then I really got into mining by the end of 2017. Built a rig, and I set up some internet cafes. I had used to own a chain of them back in the day. So we were mining with the machines there. Obviously not Bitcoin at that point, but we're mining through nice hash, and then got involved with large scale mining and basically realized, look, I've got to be involved with this full time. So I sold my businesses and decided I'm going to be involved with Bitcoin. Had no idea how, but I just knew that I had to be involved with it. And that's what I did, really. I just started writing about it, wrote a couple of books, and then started writing articles. Then that led to getting involved with quantum economics and becoming a Bitcoin analyst there, which led to sort of media stuff, being on the speaker circuit, and ultimately to various other projects, one of which, of course, is Bitcoin racing. And I'm going to bow out there for my story and hand it over to Charlie.
Thank you. Yeah, well, my story is very different, and we I always say it started in 2008, but that's obviously before Bitcoin was even invented, and it's not because we got involved when Bitcoin was less than a penny to buy, unfortunately. Um, but what happened to my family was we were involved in the financial housing crisis, and it affected us really badly. So it resulted in my mum losing three restaurant businesses. My grandparents lost a beautiful, stunning home, a Georgian house, which it's always been my goal to try and buy that back one day, but inflation is just doing me over right now. We lost all our cars and things, but somehow managed to keep part of the house that me and my family live in at the moment. And my mum went from being director of three restaurants to becoming a school cook, and paying the mortgage of a five-bedroom house on the wage of a school cook is very difficult. But somehow she managed to do that. But we only ever managed to pay off the interest and never any of the principal sum. And then, we go years on like this, just managing to get by. And then it got to March 2020, and we received a letter from Lloyd's Bank saying they were going to repossess our home in 4 years' time. So the kind of well, we didn't much like that thought very much, losing another family house. And my mum basically called a family meeting, and she asked us to discuss our strengths and weaknesses, um, in the hopes that we might start a new business together as a family or find something that we can do together to save the family house. We looked at starting new restaurants, but we was really lucky that we didn't, because in 2020 in March, it was just before lockdowns came along, so our new restaurant would have been shut down. We looked at hiring a warehouse to do Amazon distribution, but we didn't feel we had the skills. Um, my line of thinking was different. I wanted something easier, so just a nice investment that would just go to the moon. And uh, I knew that during recessions, you get wealth transfers, obviously, because my family was on the negative side of one. And in 2020, during COVID, people's businesses being closed, money being printed, it felt like the recipe for another recession. So I just Googled, how do I get my family on the positive side of a recession? And that's how we started learning about hard money. And it was a documentary called The Hidden Secrets of Money, where we learned all of these um, crazy things that no one in my family had ever even heard about before. No school had ever taught us. And we then got kind of led into Bitcoin through that series. It was one of the later episodes, but it starts off talking about Hedera hash graph or something. So we got a bit conflicted. And also that series focuses on gold as well. But we liked Bitcoin because basically it's outside of the system that caused us all of those problems we had before. And it helps us realize that we need to get away from the modern financial system and embrace something new. And amazingly, we would have actually, based on the investment we made, we would have saved the house. But now we're very conflicted because we want to keep hold of the Bitcoin because of the scarcity and the future potential that Bitcoin has, opposed to a property. So we're in a funny situation right now, trying to figure out what the best plan is. But I'm voting for Bitcoin. My mum is more on the side of house, but we'll see. Maybe I'll end up on the streets.
But with your Bitcoin.
Exactly. A nice hardware wallet, keeping me warm.
I was just about to say the typical Bitcoin meme where like the guy is wearing probably like a bin bag, whatever, but he still has his coins.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'll be also on the side of I'll keep the Bitcoin and get rid of the house, but like obviously there's an emotional attachment to it.
Exactly.
Quite two different stories of how you guys got on, and I think it symbolizes the best case example for Bitcoin because it unites us all. When did the Bitcoin racing thing become real? Was it an evolution out of we discovered Bitcoin, we got on board? Were you already racing, Charlie? What's the story there?
Well, my dad has been into racing and cars for his whole life, and he was always that cool young lawyer who always had a much nicer car than all of his peers, and he'd make all of his mates jealous. So, yeah, he loved racing, anything to do with cars, and he has done racing at quite high levels before. But obviously, it's extremely expensive, and when two boys come along, that there's a big cost associated with that. But he used to take us go-karting, me when I was 6. Sorry, my brother when he was 6, me when I was 8. So we started quite young, and we've just shared that passion together. But after we discovered Bitcoin and we learned more about it, I think lots of people reach the phase where they either want to work in it full time, like Jason, or they'd like to find a way that they can give back and help spread that message to other people. And we knew that we had, as a family, this small race team. It's running in a championship called the City Car Cup. We just had one car, very low level, not really too many viewers, but a really exciting and unique way to us to be able to do our bit to promote Bitcoin. So we converted the cars to a Bitcoin standard. We took in some of the other drivers in the championship who were doing a very good job near the front of the pack, and we brought them into the team. And that first year we drove 5,000 miles across the UK in a big transporter with a massive Bitcoin logo on it to various tracks. We entered 20 races, and the Bitcoin logo is coming to a race circuit near you because of us. And it just gets people thinking about it, asking the right questions. It puts it back at the forefront of their minds again in a more positive and unique way, rather than hearing the same old negative stuff that comes through the media all the time. And obviously, as part of the team's plan and ambition, it's been to advance the race team to bigger series where they have much more viewers, but also to present that Bitcoin message in an authentic and family-oriented way to help other families learn the same lessons that we did, so that in the next financial crash, the same thing doesn't happen to them as it did to us.
What opportunities do you have when you're out there representing your team and Bitcoin? Do you get much interest or questions from people from other teams? And how do you go about promoting or orange pilling people out on the circuits?
Yeah, it does happen. I mean, obviously, the championship. I'm driving this year in that championship. This is my rookie year as a driver at age 52. I suddenly thought, if I'm ever going to do it, I better do it now, right?
Go for it, Jason,
got my license. Got my license in February, and I've we're several weekends in, and it's gone pretty well so far, apart from the little incident at the last track. But yeah, so it's fairly intimate, this thing. They are streamed on YouTube, but the coverage isn't massive. So because it's fairly intimate, you do tend to know people quite well. We see the same drivers, the same crews, sometimes even the same spectators, because there's quite a little cult following that follows us around. So you're able to have one-on-one conversations, and they do vary quite a lot in terms of sort of quality and outcome, what have you. But, with the right people to speak to, and we're all sort of approachable, and we'll talk about Bitcoin till the cows come home, like all of us here. So it's a great way to do it. Now, we did run a car in a higher championship this year, and that's quite a different experience, because this is obviously far less intimate. There's a lot of people there, so you get a much more you don't get as much direct feedback, but you do have people asking the question, what is that Bitcoin? Is Bitcoin sponsoring this? Who runs Bitcoin? Who's the CEO? Who made that decision? So you get these questions, and of course they're the questions we asked right back in the day. So where they're coming from, right? And it just so happens that we can try and answer them for people.
Yeah, and there's another aspect of how motorsports can actually help people start at least thinking about it, and things like brand awareness, and they are hard to measure the return on investment in a way. If you're a sponsor coming onto a car, how can you measure the impact of return on investment and stuff? And that's actually very difficult. But having the Bitcoin logo just out there, and in the Porsche Carrera Cup, for example, in front of 40,000 people per race weekend, TV time as well, having that logo out there associated with something positive like racing is a good thing, because usually people's first touch points are Bitcoin uses stupid amounts of energy, or Bitcoin's going to kill the planet in a few years. But if you actually have it associated with a sport you love or something positive, people approach it differently. And having 40,000 people seeing that logo ride by them, they're going to start thinking about it again. And it's been presented this time in a positive way. So just the brand awareness stuff, that we've obviously put the logo in front of tens of thousands of people, be it through transporting the cars to different racetracks, having them on YouTube, or even ITV in the UK. That impact we can't measure, but there is still an impact to be had there. So I can't tell you how many people have gone down the rabbit hole because they've seen their favorite race car with a Bitcoin logo on it, but I'm sure that some have. And that's why we want to be moving up the ranks and getting it out to more people. And there's other things.
It would be cool though. In years to come, I reckon we'll hear stories where people say, "Well, I saw it on this race car once. I can't remember who these guys were." And I started reading about it, and you'll have someone on this podcast saying, "Yeah, that's how it started," and I misread it as Bitcoin on this car, and it went from there.
Yeah. And I think with other things with brand awareness as well, if you're more likely to choose a brand that you have seen more often. So in terms of Bitcoin versus shitcoins, hopefully it means people who've seen Bitcoin more will choose Bitcoin instead of the tens of thousands other disasters out there.
Yeah, and I guess it really works also in terms of how Bitcoin has gotten to where it is. It is a grassroots movement, and if like I'm a big Formula One fan, if I turn on Formula One, like I saw FTX and I don't know Phantom on like AlphaTauri and Mercedes and all of that crap. And so you kind of get that, oh, it's an elitist thing, whereas what you guys do is you start at the bottom, literally from what I've heard, like I guess there's go-karting and then the lower leagues, and you actually bring Bitcoin into the conversation. And is it like a good fit? Because if I think about motor racing, I think a lot of people also have negative aspects to it. You know, art still uses fossil fuels and all of that crap. I guess if people are interested at the racetracks, they're probably easier to orange pill than normies watching at home on their couch, or is that just too much wishful thinking from my end?
No, you're absolutely right. So that at the track you can have these conversations, and you can have quite good long conversations, particularly in the lower championships. At the high level, you have to have some kind of funnel, some kind of follow up. And that's part of what we do as well, because some of the other projects I'm involved with are helping people get started with Bitcoin. So they're about educating people in Bitcoin. So particularly the Bitcoin hodlers group and system that it's a Telegram group designed to help people go through that learning process, ask whatever questions they want. So that's why we teamed up with Bitcoin Racing to provide that on-ramp for people, so they've got somewhere to go, ask those questions. Oh, by the way, listen to this podcast, read this book, and this is interesting as well. So yeah, you're absolutely right. You have to have some kind of follow-up to make that work, and we're getting better at that as well, because it was all a bit, stuck together with string and sellotape to start with, and this is gradually getting better and better as time goes on.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, really quick point. If you look at like consumer insight information from different types of championships, like NASCAR, for example, people are more likely to look into the brands that sponsor or are associated with racing, because they know that it's the sponsors who provide the financial oil to keep the cars going. So their favorite sport is happening because of the sponsors involved, and therefore they're much more likely to look into them, use them, and start getting to know what they do. So actually, people, like you said, people involved in motorsports probably easier to orange pill, because they may be thinking, oh, Bitcoin's involved somehow, and now I get to see a Porsche Cup car on the grid, and Bitcoin is somehow assisting with this, so I want to learn more. And I appreciate Bitcoin because it's allowing my favorite sport to be taking place. And obviously it's kind of backward way of looking at it. It applies much more to sponsors, but it would still start people looking into it, if that makes sense.
Totally, and it kind of feeds into what I was going to ask, in the sense that, Joel, when you mentioned the likes of FTX branding on cars and things like that, and obviously we know what happened with all that, but a lot of people do get confused and they conflate Bitcoin with FTX, and I'm wondering whether there is any work to be done in relation to trying to get people to understand that Bitcoin is its own standalone entity and it's not associated in any way with the other exchanges or crypto cars that might be running alongside Bitcoin. Is there anything that can be done in that regard, or any thought process that you guys have in that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive thing. I mean, we could probably just spend 3 hours on that one question, but you're absolutely right, because I think all of us do it. I think we've all been guilty of this, is that when we first discover Bitcoin, because we don't understand it yet, we tend to then go for the other coins. Oh, that's the next Bitcoin, that's better than Bitcoin, until you really understand why Bitcoin is completely different from anything else. And that takes time. It really does. And of course, so you've got to be patient with new people, because they're doing exactly what you did, right? So you've got to remember that. But as a team, we've made a decision. We are a Bitcoin racing team, right? So we will only partner with companies that are dealing with Bitcoin, right? So we if we went out to get sponsored by crypto, frankly, it'd be quite easy because all of these coins, as you know, they're owned in some way or centralized, or there's a foundation, a decision maker. There's not a CEO of Bitcoin that we can go to. So we can use the brand, but we have to find that sponsorship through companies related, but very specifically related with Bitcoin. So that's how we cope with that. It's probably a little bit subtle, and we're going to have to do more work to try and make that differentiation.
We are working on the Bitcoin hodlers thing, Jason, and it is part of the plan now to up our game in terms of the education side and the actual supporting people through the correct journey. And Jason will speak more about the Bitcoin hodlers group, but as a summary, it's basically a Telegram channel where you have a mixture of newbies and experts, and anyone can come in and ask about Bitcoin. If anyone brings up a shitcoin, we have police on hand to stop those discussions happening. And actually,
in a nice way, right? Because you got to remember, again, that's what we were like, right? So this is the difference, right? So we don't come around your house and club you, right? Just do it in a nice way.
Yeah. So now things have been really hectic for us trying to advance the team, and get from the bottom rungs to a very high and elite level is not an easy thing to do, and in fact has made us have to compromise slightly on the educational side that we are offering. But now, given the time we have between the new season in 2024, we're really focusing on getting our educational piece fully organized. And from now on, we're going to have a QR code on the truck where people can gain entry to the Telegram group and ask questions. They'll be on the cars, and people we speak to will also direct them to that group as well. So that's just a summary. But Jason is obviously he manages this particular what's the word for it? Particular project. There we go.
Community. We call it community. But I mean, to be honest, Charlie, you've summarised it perfectly. There's very little I need to add to that. I mean, it is as simple as that. So you can just join it. And I said we teamed up a lot with Bitcoin Racing to do this, because remember, those guys were racing before I discovered them. And I just thought the messages are fundamentally the same. What we're trying to do is get the logo out and get the education out. So let's join forces. It just makes sense. And then one thing, led to another, as it always does, particularly after a few beers down the pub. Next thing you know, I'm driving the car and decision making the team as well, which is brilliant. No regrets at all on that one.
And if you guys are happy for us to share the link to the Telegram group, we'll happily put it in the show notes for you guys as well.
Yeah, we'll do. Yeah.
So you mentioned you only work with Bitcoin company sponsors, and I do see a Bukele 24 hat next to Charlie and a El Salvadorian flag behind Jason. You're also involved with El Salvador, the country, essentially. Can you maybe dive down how that evolved, or what sort of the ideas is to also use the first and so far one of the better countries to adopt the Bitcoin standard in the Bitcoin racing team?
I will pass over to you, Charlie, on this, but I mean, you're absolutely right, because this is a key part of who we are as a team. And actually, we have skipped over it so far, so I'm sorry, Mr. Bukele, but we won't do it again. Absolutely right. But I mean, these guys are already having some initial conversations with quite senior officials in El Salvador at the time. And when I joined the team, then I travelled out there with them. And maybe you can take that up from there, Charlie, because I don't want to steal your thunder.
Well, I think you always do a really good job of describing it, but I can start and then you can add where you like. But yeah, essentially, after we started the team, El Salvador shortly made Bitcoin legal tender, and we thought, we need to get this synergy going, and it would make sense to have the El Salvador flag on the car. And actually, it was my mum's idea to do that, so hats off to her. I don't really say that too often, so she needs some credit there.
Well done, Mum.
And yeah, exactly. Basically, we just rocked up to the embassy in Mayfair, and we spoke to the ambassador and told her, we'd like to put your flag on 4 race cars. What do you think? And she sends off all of the documents we shared with her and all the information to the presidential office, and then it comes back with permission that we can now run the flag on the car and promote their country as well through motorsports. So that was amazing. And they also introduced us to this Salvadorian racing driver called Sebastian. And he had actually just gone through this really amazing opportunity of featuring on a Netflix show. And she was telling us, you need to get him driving for you. You've got the flag on the car. You can have an El Salvadorian driver, and he's going to have millions of followers. He can promote Bitcoin. He can promote the country. It'll be the best synergy. And we obviously love the idea. And down the line, we're invited to the country, and we met with literally, I met the vice president at one of the meetings, and I spoke to him about the British Touring Car Championship, which is the Porsche Carrera Cup is involved in the British Touring Car Championship. So I presented that prospectus to him, which was pretty nerve-wracking.
I haven't got it back nowadays.
Oh no, yeah. His secretary stole it from me, but I couldn't say no. And,
True.
yeah, well, we met other people, Department of Tourism, the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of Sports, and they all just loved the idea. And the really cool thing was that we presented them when we first met them a small City Car Cup team, which is completely irrelevant championship. It's a Citroen C1, but they didn't care about that. They had no judgment, and I think that's really cool. Like, they didn't say, "Oh, we don't want our flag on a rubbish little C1. We want to be with the
Can
big
you stop
guys."
dissing my car, man?
Yeah, no, sorry. It was mine before you.
There's nothing wrong with a
And then
Citroen.
you
I
took it.
love that car. You know, I mean, they are so much fun.
Well, can you treat it with more respect, please?
Okay, touche. Yeah.
So yeah, as part of the progression from C1 to higher championship, we were speaking with the country a lot about that. And El Salvador it's important for them now to go through this rebranding from highest murder rate capital in the world, not safe for tourism, to safest tourism in the world and most beautiful, and being associated with all the positive attributes of racing, a very cool brand ambassador, Netflix celebrity. These are all things that could assist them in that journey to presenting the country in the new way and taking people's minds away from all the negative things that used to be there. And we did work closely with the Department of Tourism in our stint in the Carrera Cup. So we had the logo for Visit El Salvador on the car, flag on the Porsche as well, and the Salvadorian driver in the car. So that's the summary there. Jason, did you want to add anything?
No, again, you've covered everything nice. I mean, obviously, I've been out there twice now as well to meet with the same officials. We were actually presented to the Parliament in the Asamblea Legislativa in San Salvador. So actually, I was sitting there thinking, this is amazing. This is the room the law was passed in, and you can see them all sitting there. And honestly, I got goosebumps sitting there. I just thought it was so cool. And this is all through a little racing team with big ambitions, just to do the same thing effectively that El Salvador wants to do, which is get this message of Bitcoin out there, but also in their from their perspective, as Charlie said, just say to people, look, this is a cool country to come to. And I can tell you, it absolutely is. And we absolutely love it. We'll be going back out as soon as we can. And you know, it's a very safe place, but the hope in people's eyes is genuinely moving, because they've had such a terrible time for years, decades, and suddenly there are people like, I can run a business. I can go to the shops. I can go to this area of San Salvador that's been off limits for 10 years, and now there's music and dancing. I mean, you can't. It's hard to explain, but there's a real kind of passionate edge to it.
And they now have an opportunity to become part of the Western world, let's call it, because we had Pierre on last week, who told us that his El Salvadorian business, obviously you need a bank account, and to get that bank account onto the Swift network, he has to wait 6 months. With Bitcoin, all they have to do is download that wallet, ideally self-custody wallet and all of these things, and they can basically request money from anywhere in the world. Doesn't really matter where they're coming from, instantly at a very low cost compared to what you pay with the banks. And I think these little stories are the ones we as Bitcoiners need to put out, because we've mentioned this a few times onto the show. We do have a Bitcoin culture, But let's face it, we're the nut jobs at like 3 a.m. in a pub telling you why the financial system's fucked and how to get out of it, which is all true, right? But like for a normie, they're kind of sitting there go like, either he had shrooms or he's just wasted and does something else throughout the whole day. And to have these use cases like, hey, this country in the middle of, in Central America, adopted as legal tender, tourism has improved, safety has improved. You can pay for your drinks at the beach with Bitcoin, or if you choose to go for a racetrack in England, you can also interact with people who bring Bitcoin to the people and not just make it an investment, if that makes sense. And I think props to you guys for coming up with the idea and also being courageous enough. Because I imagine it's... Yeah, exactly. Hats off to Charlie's mum. We'll clip this, Ian, and post it everywhere on social, so it gets maximum exposure. But I guess it's not been easy in the beginning, or has there also been some negative feedback in terms of, you know, if you wanted to go up to different leagues, different competitions, that people went like, yeah, you know, shut up and keep driving, or whatever, or has it always been very, very positive?
That's a good.
I mean, Charlie, again, I think you might be better qualified to answer that, but I think the one point I would make is that's largely irrelevant to what we're going to do anyway, because you know, honey badger doesn't care, right? As we always say, and Bitcoin is Bitcoin, and the reality is, whether even we agree with it, it's here, it's going to stay, it's going to grow. So it's kind of irrelevant to what we want to do, but we just want to make sure we get the message out, and we want to get it right, and we want to help people understand it, you know, warts and all of where this thing is going and why it's important to understand. But from a team specific point of view, Charlie, that's quite an interesting question, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, during a bear market and things, obviously, as I said, it takes money to race in these high levels, and we said when we were going to start this that we'd be honest and tell you the true journey. Obviously, Bitcoin is honest, so we'll talk about how the Porsche Carrera Cup came about, and I'm happy to speak about all those numbers. I think, Jason, if you're happy with that, we can do that. Yeah. I mean,
let's do it. These numbers are a little bit eye-watering, by the way.
Yeah.
So let's sit down.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, about 3 days before the Carrera Cup started, we kind of got confirmation that it would actually be possible for us to make an entry, join a team with a car, and actually get into the championship. And the way we did that was we got let down by a sponsor early on, who said we can only pay 20% up front, and that wasn't going to be enough for us to pay the entry fee for Porsche, which was, I think, £27,000.
Plus
so
that.
to anyone American, you can, I don't know what the exchange rate is, but it makes it much uglier number.
Yeah.
But amazingly, just we've got this very good friend of the team who is quite high net worth individual, and he agreed to lend us the entry fee money and some to go on to race. And so as the team members, we actually backed that loan ourselves. So essentially we are, as a team and a family, paying for the Porsche Cup. But it was a favourable loan. We've got a long time to pay it back. We also procured a sponsorship from a company called Monochrome Bitcoin Trust, which is an Australian ETF. It's run by the former CEO of Binance Australia, and he absolutely loves Porsche's motorsports, and he supports it in a big way. And it was really kind of him to get involved with us. And we also had some money due in from a place I'm probably not allowed to mention. Jason, you can take over in a sec, but that was also delayed, so it made the whole thing difficult. One sponsor said we'll pay you 20% up front and the rest some terms later. It was a complicated thing. Another one has been very much delayed, so actually it meant that we had to withdraw from the competition. But you know, as a family, we were happy to take that risk. We want Bitcoin to be there. We're happy it was out in front of 80,000 fans. We love Bitcoin that much that, you know, if everything goes wrong for the team, we'll still be pleased that we managed to get a car out there on the grid, and hopefully it had some impact, which we think it did, you know, based on the discussion we had earlier. but yeah, we're now trying to get our ducks in order before the championship starts, not 3 days before. So this
That's
is
not a
where
good
we want to
idea,
have.
by the way.
Yeah,
Don't
it's
do
not a
that.
good idea.
That's really not clever, right?
Yeah. So we've got a more modest target. It's the 2024 JCW Mini Challenge. It's within the British Touring Car Championship as a support race. They're 300 horsepower front-wheel drive sequential gearbox cars. Um, the audience numbers are absolutely massive. 16 million on TV, 400,000 spectators a year. They get about 10 million hits per season on their social media account and stuff. So it is a significant championship, but it's also a lot cheaper than the Carrera Cup. And we said we were going to talk numbers. So that's looking, a full championship would be about £200,000 for a full year. And that's about 30 grand a race weekend. So you can imagine, like, it got a bit stressful having to look for 30 grand installments, which is basically the average wage in the UK. So it definitely mounted up on me. I was like, blimey, we've got to go out there and try and find sponsors for this. And that's, that's a nice average wage, to be honest. But now the City Car Cup, in comparison, it's 75,000 for a full year. We've got some funds already in place, some sponsors. One of them's called Nexus Point, who have come on board. We've had some amazing discussions with some actually pretty big companies, a few stock exchange listed companies, who we're really hoping will come and help us this year round. And we won't have to worry about procuring money. We can focus on doing the education properly and, doing everything right, rather than having this massive weight on our shoulders. So 2024, it should be a nicer year for us, we're hoping.
Yeah, and that's the key point, actually, Charlie, because you want to solve the money problem, because as Charlie says, we spent all our time trying to solve the money problem rather than actually getting the Bitcoin message out. I mean, we still got it out because it was on the car and we did some promotional material and what have you. But of course, in retrospect, we say, well, actually, if you take care of the money thing, we can really go to town with this and we're really creative and slightly crazy and like to do really, oddball stuff if we can to promote Bitcoin in any way, shape, form. So if we're freed up to do that, we can really work with our partners and sponsors to get seriously creative, both on the track and all the social media that's linked to it. And I guess you guys know the minis, the JCW. I mean, I saw Joel shaking his head, nodding his head there. And of course, it is a crazy, crazy championship, and people watch it because, frankly, there's quite a lot of incidents because these cars are super fast, very small, quite difficult to stop sometimes, and there's always something going on. A couple of minis crashing into each other or spinning off or something. So it's a very entertaining championship as well. And I won't be driving that, by the way, because it should be made completely clear at this point.
I was just about, before Charlie explained it, to ask, is that 30 grand per weekend with the other cup before someone puts it into the wall? But you kind of put it out.
Yeah, you got to pay for tyres, damages, everything else. It's on the driver or the team to pay for that. So you can't say, well, I've got 30 grand for this weekend. Well, if you have an incident, then it's not going to be 30 grand anymore. It's going to be
definitely
maybe double. Who knows?
But it shows a great point, which I think we're sometimes missing in the Bitcoin ecosystem or in the social layers, because everyone's shitposting on Twitter anyway. So that's more on that front. You do need money at one point to actually bring in change to the system, whether that be attention, brand awareness, like you guys do it, or whether that be I don't think people should get into serious trouble to commit to the cause of Bitcoin. If you still get paid by, I don't know, banks, fintechs to do your job, and you can actually take that money and put it into Bitcoin, contribute it to Bitcoin, that's a net positive for me. You shouldn't be a purist and sort of say, oh, if it has anything to do with this or that, we shouldn't do it. Because, we go up against a huge thing, which is the legacy financial system and all of these institutions. So it does help sometimes to also think economically, I think, and not to always sort of put Bitcoin on the pedestal and try and figure out a way later on, which you guys are doing. And so I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing the Bitcoin racing, or just the Bitcoin logo generally, on TV next year. Hopefully on P1. I mean, that'd be amazing.
Well, Well, I have to say, one of our drivers actually, we're looking at a team of maybe 3 cars next year. I mean, none of this is confirmed. I just want to make that clear at this point. That's our goal. One of those drivers actually is Charlie's brother, Chris Mackenzie. I have to give a big up to him because he's consistently. In the top sort of levels of the C1 car. He's been racing for a few years now, and he's one of the guys that him and I will do the same lap on a track, and it will come in. It'll be like, how is he 5 seconds faster than me? I'm thinking, I've just gone. I'm coming all sweating, and I've taken every corner I possibly can, and he comes in all casual and calm, and I have a cup of tea now, and he's that good. He's just got that edge. He's able to see the line far better than I am, and he can do it. So, and plus he's just a thoroughly nice guy. So to have him in the car in the JCW Mini section, I think it's a natural move. I think he's reached his limit now with the C1s, and I think he will do very well. We've got another couple of drivers as well who are just at the moment earmarked and talking about they're also strong. So the goal is not just to be in the championship, but the goal is also, to be visible in the championship and have some commentators talking about it and having the names out there and getting people really involved. So that's part 2. Part 1 is in there. Part 2 is win the damn thing.
Nice.
Let's do it. Let's go. Jason, I want to revisit your rabbit hole story, if that's okay. And,
yeah, please do.
Once you overcame your accidental foreshadowing of Bitcoin CBDCs, and after your reading of the economists' opinions on Bitcoin, what was the hook for you when you first sort of looked at it again? What was it that captured your interest specifically about Bitcoin at that stage?
Well, do you know what? I don't think anyone's ever asked me that question in terms of something specific. I don't remember really a eureka moment for me anyway. I just knew that it was really cool. And I don't think I've been involved with the development of, the adoption of the internet in the early 90s, right? So I worked for this little software company called Microsoft, and a little startup. And
small fry.
One of my... And I was brand manager there for, or one of them for the brand in the UK. But part of my role was going out and helping drive internet adoption. And I've got to tell you, I don't know if you guys know this or remember this, but the objections to the internet are actually very similar to the ones we're seeing now. So there's a lot of stuff about energy use. There's famous headlines about, throw another lump of coal on the fire because someone's ordered a book from Amazon. There was a lot of that going on. A lot of people saying it was pointless. It had no use case. All of this stuff, which you can't believe now, but it was like that then. I was involved right with that at the cutting edge. And then suddenly to have kind of a second bite of the cherry, it just felt kind of cool. It's like, to do this twice in a lifetime, to be involved with something is just super cool. So I still get really passionate about it. But in Eureka moment, no. And I did the same as everyone else did. I went and bought XRP and Ether and Litecoin and a myriad of other crap, thinking I was doing the right thing. And even wrote about some of them, I'm embarrassed to say, before I started getting that. And I think the eureka point is only when you realise there is that difference between crypto and Bitcoin. So it kind of came in a long roundabout way for me, I suppose. Once you see that, you can't unsee it.
And what about you, Charlie? How was there any specific moment for you, or was it just like a slow evolution like Jason's?
I think when we got through those first 4 episodes and we realised how dreadful that the financial system is, and I didn't like the idea of thinking that every penny we've earned is being devalued, and you make it worse by depositing more money into the bank. Like, you actually make yourself poorer by giving the bank more money to go and lend out to someone and then cause more inflation, and I did not like that at all. So actually, like 98% of my net worth is in Bitcoin. And luckily, I've managed to keep hold of it after all these disasters we've been through recently, which I'm quite amazed at, to be honest, being relatively new. Like, we survived Celsius, BlockFi, and we did have money in those. But connecting the dots from what happened to us in 2008 and seeing how the system is so bad, it's bound to happen again. It comes in cycles, and we just need to protect ourselves and get away from it. That was the main thing for us. I think, lots of people in, the wealthier countries don't see the value in Bitcoin because they've never had a negative financial experience. But because my family had done, it was easier for us to go into it. We don't live in a hyperinflationary country where Bitcoin is an absolute obvious thing. Lots of people just get by, they get the pay rises, they can pay for the increased charge on avocados. They get a bit angry about it, but they can afford it still somehow. But there will come a point when they can't. But for us, luckily, we had the negative experience first, which allowed us to embrace it more with open arms. So I'm not.
I think you got there quicker than I did, Charlie. Honestly, I do, because I think that shock probably gave you more of a kick up the arse. We got to take some action. Whereas I'd come into it, oh, this is interesting, and poked it with a stick then for a few years, So, but as you said at the start, everyone's story is so different. But I think you got there quicker than I did.
I think. Well, we were desperate at the same time, and to give credit to my dad now, you've mentioned mum, bring my dad in. He said, check out Bitcoin, Charlie. So that's kind of, he actually, I don't mention that enough. Maybe I like the credit. But I was the one who found the educational materials to make it make sense. And obviously allowed them, my dad was like 68 at the time. And that the technology of just setting up a Coinbase account, which is unfortunately where we started, was all too much for him. So I found the education and was able to help facilitate it. And then we quickly moved to hardware wallets. And at the moment, I've got the nightmare of persuading him to move away from Ledger into a Bitcoin-only device, and he's scared about that. And but yeah, credit to him, because he actually he mentioned it, and that's probably what focused me to go and look into that. And then
so there you go. See, Team Mackenzie.
Yeah,
right across the board between all of you, you've got everything you need, right? So it was a no-brainer to start the racing team, and then pick up people like me to come and play with you.
It didn't stop with my parents. I managed to get the grandparents involved.
Nice.
My sister, my brother, my sister's fiance has been much more difficult, but he owns some Bitcoin. He's much more difficult though. My sister's kids, they've got some Bitcoin put to the side now as well. So I didn't let anyone in the family escape. My auntie, my cousin, I managed to get them all.
Well done to you. That's not an easy task. So yeah, that's amazing.
No, it isn't.
I probably just said, "Oh, guys, you're going to get rich in a few years."
Yeah, good.
We do start with the number go up technology, right? That's kind of our starting point usually, and then we learn it later.
That's how most people get into Bitcoin. Think, maybe I can make a bit of money with this, and they start dabbling with all the other ones as well, and then it's a slow evolution into discovering why Bitcoin is different. And it goes to a testament to what you say, Joel. Sometimes you have to get burnt before you realise the truth, and it seems that Charlie, you've gone through that difficult journey with the housing crisis, and as has your family. And I suppose in times of desperation, you have to kind of look into things a lot quicker and deeper than if you're just curious about it. So yeah, props to you for doing all that. I wanted to sort of make a point of the fact that I came across this book, and it's nothing to do with this episode really directly, but it sparked me to say it when you said you read an article, Jason, by an economist writing FUD about Bitcoin. And there's a book out there at the moment called The Future of Money, I think it is. And it's by a guy who's a member of the WEF called Eswar Prasad. And he's like a world-renowned economist. And he talks about CBDCs and the future of money. And there's a whole section, there's a whole paragraph, a whole chapter, in that book dedicated to Bitcoin. And it does a very, very good job, I've got to say, of describing exactly what Bitcoin is. It goes into the ins and outs of it and the fundamentals of Bitcoin. But all it is it's setting up towards the end of the actual chapter. It introduces all the FUD, like the environmental impact, and it's slow, and it ignores all the things that are happening on the Lightning Network and things like that. And I do worry about how people do absorb the information from these economists because of some sort of reputation they might have or knowledge about money, and how that might ultimately sway people away from Bitcoin. Any views from anyone, including you, Joel?
Yes, fax machine. Paul Krugman. Paul Krugman. He famously said the internet is never going to survive. The fax machine will always stay on. And guess what? The only people who still use fax machines are probably doctors, I imagine. Oh, yes. Paul Krugman, yeah. So yeah. It's funny when you explained it, Ian. I knew exactly which book. I knew exactly which chapter. I was like, okay, he's going towards the FUD thing. So many of these economists underappreciate the fact that if people or civilizations standing with the backs against their walls, it's amazing what we can do as a species. Like Charlie is the best case example, right? They had to come up with a solution. They went down the rabbit hole. They found Bitcoin. Other people might as well, build stuff because they had different miseries. We had Ray on, who's now part of building SafeKit because he had a horrible experience again with Paxful and with like previous companies. So he sort of relived these things. And I think the more this happens, the more it's just proof to me that Bitcoin in one way or another is inevitable, whether it is as a form of money, a protocol, a communications layer, whatever. And yeah, if they think it's going to eat up the world's energy, have a go at it. It won't. We'll probably be more greener by 2028, I think, than what the whole banking world will ever be. So, like, if they want to attack us, go for it, because every attack makes it stronger.
And it speaks to your adoption of the internet comment you made, Jason, about the FUD that was going on around the times of the internet, right?
Yeah, and I tell you what, I was at events with Microsoft, and people actually got angry with us. I had one guy we had the little CDs you used to give out. Do you remember those? You just stored on your computer, and the guy actually threw it at me in fury because of what we were doing, and I just, it was so bizarre. But yeah, this disinformation, obviously misinformation, disinformation, whatever you want to call it, is a huge problem. It still remains a huge problem. There seems to be a whole new generation of misinformation, disinformation. Don't get me started on the green energy thing, because obviously as a miner, I'm heavily involved with this, and the projects we're involved with are provably beneficial to the environment. And one that's really getting my goat at the moment is obviously Greenpeace's Change the Code campaign. You can get away with one or two tweets because you're not educated. But when you've had, it's totally ratioed, all of their tweets are. And you only need a couple of the tweets to realise, actually, maybe we've got this wrong. Maybe we should research, because these are really educated people, quite, simply putting the case across. And it's just being ignored because of this, this XRP angle, and being paid off effectively by this $5 million campaign to do this. And it's crazy, utterly pointless, and ultimately it'll go down in history as one of those things. Oh, do you remember when Greenpeace did this? And they're actually campaigning against the very thing which will probably yield more help than anything else they've been involved with ever. I mean, it's crazy, right?
Yeah, and they were sponsored by Ripple as well, weren't they?
That was it.
For the Scholar Satoshi thing. Yeah, ridiculous.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I'm going to stop there because I will go off on one in a minute, so I'm just going to be quiet now.
Charlie, for you, is there anything you want to add?
Well, I guess it's why we want to present the message in a positive and unique way, to just detract from all that rubbish, and rather than the first touch point being an economist who's anti-Bitcoin or Greenpeace or something else. They first come into contact by something positive, and I think that's quite important, because I also worry, people. We've seen through various crises that people can be very easily led and persuaded. They never do the research. They accept things as facts without looking into things themselves. And I find that weird. And, my time at university, we let's do a critical analysis of this, look into the research and write what's terrible about it and what they haven't done right. And no one does that. And I find that really concerning. What's the source of this information? What's the agenda? Why are they presenting it in this way? What do they have to gain from it? They just say, oh, economist, he's an expert. So he's telling the truth.
Right.
Well, he's an
not
expert
good.
maybe in fiat thinking, and
Exactly.
that's it is a mindset change, and that's the thing. All of us here have gone through that mindset change, right? We started the number go up. I can make more fiat by trading this Bitcoin. It takes time to transition, so
Definitely.
that's probably why, right?
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, it's like you say, Jason, we have to remember where people come from. And, I just look at it. Ian and I had this off topic from this recording today once in Telegram where we went like, we're probably going to have some form of comment which like, we had one guy commenting that he's not into digital currencies because the elite can take it away from us. And so I had to explain to him on like a Sunday, what was it, Ian? Sunday afternoon? Ian was out and about with the family. I was at home sort of keyboard worrying.
And updating me live.
I can't come down the pub because somebody's wrong on Twitter.
Honey, you need to go out and shop for the food. Now, I still got to respond to this twat. But we sort of were repeating ourselves, and that's just part of the cycle we're in now. Having said that, though, look at the coverage that's coming out now. I know it sort of is the thing with the mainstream media thing we often read about, but you do have some stuff where the narrative is changing, and I think we'll get there. It'll just probably be the next 30 years where we'll have to defend ourselves, but I think we'll inevitably get over that hump, just like the internet did now, because everyone's using it these days.
I had a guy who thinks Bitcoin's made by the CIA. Is that
I've heard that one before.
Yeah,
I've heard that one before.
Right. It just doesn't make sense, that question, because it just shows how little research you've actually put into it. Because if they did make it, they made a terrible mistake by giving up complete control of it. Like, it just shows that people don't do the research. They just hold on to these little things they see, these little facts. And actually, this guy in particular thinks that Bitcoin will have something to do with the central bank currencies and all the rest of it. But luckily, he's in that group chat I mentioned. We've all been trying to help guide him and tell him that's not true. And even if it was, it doesn't really matter anyway.
I think sometimes when people echo some of these things that they've maybe heard someone else say, they're just parroting some of the FUD. It's because a lot of the time they're used to being lied to and had been had over, right? And there's always a catch. It's too good to be true. So I think that is a barrier for a lot of us when we're having discussions with people about what Bitcoin is and why it's different and why you need to get some as soon as you can. And a lot of people are suspicious of what is the catch within the Bitcoin ecosystem. And I think for me personally, that is a difficult one to overcome. Before we finish, I think we should round up this episode because we're running in good time here. Is there anything you guys want to add or say, or anything that you want to bring to the episode before we close it at all? Where can people find you on the socials?
Twitter is Bitcoin_racing, and Instagram is Bitcoin.racing. Those are the ones we use primarily. We do have a Nostr account, but I'm not very good at it yet. So we're working on that. LinkedIn and all the other stuff as well. I guess my final message would obviously be a huge thank you to you guys. I've really enjoyed this one, and I think I love the focus of this particular podcast. It's got a nice human element to it, which is really cool, and you've done a great job. In terms of our plans for 2024, obviously it's been a struggle for the last couple of years, but we'd love to work with some sponsors properly, make a plan, get some marketing stuff prepared in advance of the championship, and make this a really effective and useful marketing opportunity for people. So we'd just like to invite anyone, if they've got a company or if they know anyone who's got a company that might like to be involved, come and chat to us. We'll talk to you about how we can activate the partnership to bring a return on investment, talk about the benefits, the association with El Salvador, which will very much come into play, and all the other things. And let's get creative and make it worthwhile.
That's brilliant. And guys, if you're hearing this or watching it, go to the show notes where all the links to all the information you need is there for you. Guys, thank you so much for your time. I know time is valuable, and thank you very much for sharing it with us here at Rabbit Hole Stories. And we'll see you guys.
Thank you.